welcome to the weekly wrap-up where I briefly talk about and or review all the movies I saw this past week that I haven't reviewed yet on the channel and don't plan on making specific videos for, but I still want to talk about because, it's kind of the theme here. Now, if you are here for a specific review, timestamps are in the description and are currently on the screen, so with all that being said, let's get into it. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I think I pronounced that terribly. Ungentlemanly. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. So I saw this on a Monday. I saw this, I think, what was it, a triple header? I went to go see this movie first, then I went to go see Abigail, and then I went to go see Spider-Man 2. So I did a triple header on a Monday, and starting out the gate with a movie like this really set the tone. This was a dope movie. I did not think I was going to like this movie as much as I ended up liking it. Now, this movie is essentially about a ops mission that's kind of under the books, under the radar. It's one of those like type of missions where, if you get caught, we can't save you, or it's like this is a type of mission where, whatever happens. It's one of those type of movies where they send a group of like somewhat bad guys, send them on a mission where they have to do this thing, but people can't know that the government is the one that sent them or the military is the one that sent them. It's kind of like, you could kind of compare it to like the Suicide Squad, essentially, how it works. They take the band of some of the most, despicable people, bring them together for a common good. And the reason why they chose the despicable people is because the mission that they need to do is a mission that only, I guess, ungentlemanly people can accomplish. Now, apparently this was based on a true story, which I did not know all the way up until the end credits, where they really showed the actual people and was like, oh no, this was based on a true story. And I was like completely blindsided, because when you watch the movie, obviously they play it up for theatrical effect because it's a movie. They have to play it up to make it entertaining for the audience. It was still kind of like one of those things where it's like, oh, this was based on, it's like it had a little razzle dazzle. It's like, oh, this is based on a true story. That's kind of crazy. Now, as far as the reception of this movie, it got a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes as far as critics, 92% on audience, so you can kind of tell what type of movie this is. It's like a fun blockbuster. Anytime the audience is like at a 90 something and the critics are like at a 75 or below, and it's like an action movie, you can almost tell, oh, this movie's probably just really fun. It's just like a movie that doesn't take itself pretty serious. And this is like the epitome of that, and I love that. I get it, I'm a movie critic, but I'm still a casual enjoyer of movies at the time being. Maybe towards the end of the year that might change, because I'm watching a lot of stuff right now. Like I said, Monday, triple header. I'm into the film stuff right now. I'm trying to, get into the groove of things so I can kind of sharpen my tools as far as like being able to critique stuff, but I'm still a casual enjoyer at heart. So fun movies like this that don't take itself super serious, I love. I know a lot of people give Henry Cavill flack because they say he's not really much of a leading guy. He has the looks, he seems to have the acting chops for it, but he just doesn't seem to have, I hate to say this because people drill it into the ground, he just doesn't have that main lead aura, or I guess as older people like to say, because I always like this word, he doesn't have the spunk. He doesn't have the spunk to be a leading man, is what a lot of people like to say. I think that's a bit harsh. I think he's been dealt some pretty rough hands. I think people should maybe give him a bit more chances and maybe he might come through. I don't think he's that bad. But either way, this movie was fun. Like I said, it's a fun time. It's one of those movies that doesn't take itself serious. Has a couple funny moments. The action, I think, is done well. I think the score and everything is done well. Cinematography wise, it was like whatever. It's not like, a revolutionary movie. It's rated R, and it's not that grisly. There are some, situations where it gets kind of bloody, but nothing over the top. Like, I was actually even surprised that, well, no, I get why it's rated R. But either way, I think it's a fun movie. 2-hour runtime. Does not feel like a 2-hour movie. Feels a lot like maybe like an hour 40 movie, which I always love when movies don't feel as long as they seem to be. Isaac Gonzalez, shout out to her. I want to single her out because her outfits in this movie, because I know what y'all think I was gonna say. I know y'all thought I was gonna objectify her. And don't get twisted, she looks good. But her outfits in this movie, I was looking like every other set piece. I was like, oh, she got that shit on. Like, I don't know if it was just me, but like, and I'm not even like a fashion guy. Like, I wear all black. If I could wear all black for the rest of my life, I would. Black hoodie, black sweatpants, black sneakers, do-rag, that's it, I'm out for the day. Like, that's my look. So I'm far cry from somebody that's like fashion savvy. But even still, I was watching her, like, she was throwing them fits on. She had that shit on. Like, she had that shit on. Shout out to Isaac Gonzalez, and shout out to whoever the costume designer is for her, because they put together some nice pieces for her. It was not a single shot in this movie where she did not look like, yeah. But anyways, grade rating on this movie, I think I'm gonna go ahead and give it an A-. That might be a bit high, but I really liked this movie. Like, I don't know, I really liked it. It was super fun to me, super fun. And plus it started off my day, so it kind of needed to hit. And like I said, I did not think it was gonna be good. So the fact that I came away and was like, oh, this was actually like really good, I think it gives a couple extra points for that. So next up, we have Abigail. Now, this movie was one that I kind of knew what to expect, and it did give me exactly what I expected, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So with Abigail, the way this movie goes is this young girl gets kidnapped. She gets kidnapped, sent to this house with these 5-6 ragtag group of individuals that are crime people, the bad people. So kind of similar to, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I just noticed the parallel with that. But either way, they kidnap her, take her to this place where she's supposed to be on lockdown for 24 hours. And when she's on lockdown, it turns out that they figure out that she's actually a vampire. And when they try to escape, they put the whole house like on permanent lockdown, like gate off everything. And the revelation with this movie is that she actually coordinated this entire thing because she likes to do this thing where, I guess because she's so old, she's, I guess, pegged to be like thousands of years old as a vampire, which I guess obviously makes sense. But apparently this is her thing where she takes these group of criminals, and typically they're words are hard. Criminals that are, I guess, somewhat tied to her father, who is like this all-seeing, like he's, in this world, he's looked at as like a mythical legend that does like very heinous things. And these are people that in some way or form were tied to doing something bad or indirectly hurting her dad's business. So she takes them to this house, locks them down, plays around with them, ends up killing them all. And I guess she does this because she wants to, number one, just have fun, because I guess when you're thousands of years old, you need to find, fun ways to, kill people, I guess, as a vampire. And two, she does it as a way to hopefully maybe win her dad's approval and finally get on his good side, because apparently throughout the movie it showcased that like she doesn't have the greatest relationship with her dad, which feels bad, man. Takes one to know one. But either way, because we're not going to get personal there, either way, throughout this movie they try to kill her. They try all the typical tropes, stake through the heart, garlic, stuff like that. None of that seems to work, and it takes a couple of wacky turns. She turns one of the people into a vampire. This movie's still fresh, so I guess I don't want to say who. She turns one of the people into a vampire. Melissa Barrera, she ends up turning into a vampire. A lot of people turn into vampires. I just noticed that. Now I'm thinking about it. A lot of people turn into vampires in this movie. No. Melissa Barrera, does she? No, she actually doesn't. She was about to, but she ended up not doing it. Either way, though, this movie as a whole I thought was pretty good. It was pretty good. Not the best horror movie I saw this year, but it was a pretty good horror movie. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. And it's kind of the same thing with Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. It's just like, it's a fun movie. It doesn't take itself super serious. It knows what it is. And I think when you get a horror movie like this, that's like that doesn't take itself super serious, and the premise where it's like the ballerina vampire, I like that. I'd rather them do what they did with this movie as opposed to trying to take it serious. Like, I think they knew what they had here, and I think they executed it perfectly. I thought it was really well done. I don't really have too much to say about this movie outside that it was just a pretty good horror movie that, it's pretty entertaining. So Abigail, I'll probably give a B+ too. Yeah, I'll probably give it a B+. Matter of fact, we'll go with a B. Because it's cool, man. It's cool. Like, I didn't hate it, and I did like it, but it fell short on a couple of moments for me. It was a couple of moments just like, kind of didn't like that. There's a couple of moments where it got maybe a little too goofy. And I get it, like I said, I just praised it for not taking itself super serious. But even still, I feel like there's a line that you can overstep when it's like, where can we bring it back to horror a little bit, like, because this is labeled as a horror, mystery, and thriller. It's not labeled as horror comedy. If it was horror comedy, then, I would give you some grace with that, but they didn't tag it as that. So it was a couple moments where it's like, kind of, can we get back to the horror? Can we get back to the mystery? But other than that, I really didn't have anything else bad to say about it, but I'll give it a B. So last, capping off the Monday triple header, we have Spider-Man 2, and I've seen Spider-Man 2 quite a few times. Quite a few. I've seen Spider-Man 2 more times than definitely, yeah, maybe about a dozen or so times. It used to come on all the time when I was a kid. 24, so when I was like early teens, pre-teens, it used to come on all the time on like FX, TNT, TBS. That was around the time when all those movies used to show, when it was like the Spider-Man movies, the X-Men movies. A lot of the Fast and Furious movies used to come on TNT specifically. I remember that. Rush Hour movies, Transformers, like, back in that day when I guess like the early 2000s, mid 2000 movies kind of already had their heyday. They would just get all bought up by FX and TNT and TBS. They would all buy the licenses and showcase them on those networks like 24/7. So I've seen Spider-Man 2 quite a few times at home on FX and stuff like that. So this is not my first time watching Spider-Man 2. I am very familiar with the Spider-Man franchise. But Regal, and no, it's not even Regal, Sony is doing this thing where they're showing all the Spider-Man movies every Monday. Every Monday is going in timeline order, or I guess chronological order by release date. And this week was Spider-Man 2. And because I never seen Spider-Man 2 in theaters, I figured, okay, let me go see it in theaters. And I will say, the people that love these Spider-Man movies, and I say these people, I love the Spider-Man movies. I've seen them all. I love Spider-Man. I'm not really a comic guy, but I am familiar with comics, if that makes any sense. I was paying attention before like the whole Marvel thing, so it's like I'm kind of in that in between like a comic guy and an MCU guy and just like a casual guy. I'm like somewhere in the mix of that. I don't lean one way more than the other one. I'm kind of just like smack dab in the middle of that pyramid. But either way, this movie is as good as people say it is. Most people say I don't know. Do they say it's the best Spider-Man live action? I think it is. It's definitely considered the best Raimi Spider-Man movie. I think Into the Spider-Verse probably has the cake as the best Spider-Man movie. But if we're talking live action, I think this one is probably the best. Now, I haven't seen Spider-Man 3 in theaters yet. I saw Spider-Man 1 the previous week, obviously, because I'm going every Monday to see him. But Spider-Man 3, I'm already know is going to be a dumpster fire because, like I said, I've seen every Spider-Man movie a handful of times, so I'm like familiar with them. But Spider-Man 2, it was as good as people say it is in theater. Like in the theater, it definitely hits different. The nostalgia, the humor works somehow. All these years later, like the humor still works. The crowd turnout for these movies too are incredible. I'm surprised. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised because Spider-Man is like one of the biggest IPs, like period. Especially we talk of like animated stuff, so I can't be super surprised by it. But even still, like the turnout for these movies have been crazy. I'm talking fully packed out theaters at all the showings. They have like 5, 6, 7 different showings at my local theater, and all of them are always like completely packed out, and there's probably only like the very 2 front row seats are the only ones that are like really available when it's like the day of or the day before. So the show out on these have been incredible. I know they've been breaking a lot of records, and these movies they still hold up very well. I know I haven't really been talking too much about Spider-Man 2, but that's just because like it to me, I loved it. I thought it was fun. And I think it's just interesting just to see how these movies still kind of exist in this ecosystem and how they still work. It's just crazy to me how they still work. So as far as grade rating, even though I didn't really talk about the movie that much, but it's kind of weird for me to talk about them because I'm not necessarily a comic guy. I'm not necessarily an MCU guy, and like I'm casual, but I'm familiar with this stuff. Like I've played the Spider-Man games, I played Web of Shadows, I played what's another one? I forget. Shattered Dimensions. Like I played all these like Spider-Man deep cut games. I played Spider-Man 2 on my GameCube, like the original Spider-Man 2, like the old school Spider-Man 2 on my GameCube. Like I'm familiar with this stuff, but it's always kind of hard for me to review it because I just never quite know what to say, because I feel like it's not really my place as a comic guy, because I'm not really one, and I'm not necessarily an MCU one, and these fan bases are just very, very cult-like, to say the least, the Spider-Man fan base. So I always kind of don't know quite how to approach it, but I thought it was fun. It's a good movie. It holds up well. Probably the best live action Spider-Man, at least in my opinion. Grade rating, I'll probably give it an A. It's not like an A+. A+ for me is like perfect. Like we're getting into like territory. Like I watch it frequently. I don't watch Spider-Man 2 frequently, but every time it comes on, I'll watch it. And I say that now, we're in the streaming era, so nothing just like comes on anymore because I don't watch cable. But back in the day when I was a kid, whenever Spider-Man 2 came on, I would reserve time out of my day and go watch it. So next we have the big hitter, the big one of the week, Challengers. How do I feel about Challengers? This movie is one of the many movies I have love-hate relationships with, where it does so many things well that I enjoy, but it also does a lot of things that I can't quite get behind and kind of don't really hit for me. So Challengers, this movie is, as Zendaya has coined the term in multiple interviews, codependency, the movie. This movie follows a group of three different people from three different backgrounds, I guess, and all of them are kind of intertwined and connected by tennis and I guess this weird throuple type of thing that's going on. Now, I don't want to get too deep into the plot of the movie necessarily because, it's still fairly fresh, so I don't want to spoil too much. I will say the ending specifically, because that was the thing that I was really conflicted about, but now that I've kind of sat with it for a few days, I'm recording this on a Saturday. I went to go see this movie on Thursday at like 4 p.m. So I've been sitting with it for a little bit more than about 48 hours. And I will say the ending just didn't, it left a bad taste in my mouth as far as like what I went through the entire movie. And not only that, the movie did drag at a few parts. It's not necessarily a boring movie, but it is definitely a movie. It's going to be one of those movies where critics are going to be more higher than the audience, obviously, because it's just one of those movies where it doesn't have that casual appeal. Now, me personally, because I've been getting into movies and shows more than the average person lately, because, I have a channel that's based around it, I am starting to appreciate movies like this a bit more that aren't necessarily for casual people, I guess, in mind. They are a bit more, it's a lot of undertone, a lot of different type of storytelling. And I'm not saying that to say like on some snobby shit, but like we all know, like there's movies out there that you could tell are just like the casual audience. Even if you're a casual person yourself, you can go and watch it and be like, this critics probably love this movie, but I could tell like the everyday person, they're gonna go watch this, and some of them, like the people that are not gonna like Challengers, they are not gonna like this movie like at all. Like this is gonna be one of those movies that it has like 4.5 and shit on Letterboxd, but on IMDb, when the dust is settled, it's gonna be at like a 6 or something like that, or 6.5 or something like that. Like it's gonna be one of those type of things where like the people that are like film critics, film buff inclined, are gonna like love it. Average people are not really going to like it that much. And I don't think either one is necessarily wrong for either opinion. Now, I guess to give somewhat of what's going on with this movie, basically these two guys are going through, they're up and coming tennis players. They come across Tashi, who is Zendaya, who is pegged to be like the one. She's supposed to be the next one up, the next big tennis star. And both of them are very attracted to her. Both of them try to sleep with her. And she kind of plays this game where she kind of like, how do I say this? She's not necessarily into them on like a deep emotional level. It seems to be more so she has a bit of a sociopathic type of tendency to her. I don't want to label her as a sociopath because I'm not a therapist. I didn't go to school for it, and I'm not going to be an armchair therapist or an armchair psychologist. But she has some sociopathic tendencies. I think even the everyday person can look at throughout the movie and be like, oh, this chick is she's a bit off. Now, I think a big thing that kind of makes this movie fall short for me personally is that it does seem like it's a movie that is trying a bit too hard to be deep, trying a bit too hard to kind of be cheeky, and sometimes it calls for those moments to kind of fall flat a little bit. Not only that, it's a kinky movie, which, listen, I'm like I said, I'm 24. You think I'm going to complain about seeing Zendaya and provocative situations on screen? Fuck no, never going to complain about that. But even with that, it was a couple moments where it's just like, okay, like this is a very intimate movie, and it's not like necessarily a bad thing, but it's a thing. It's one of those things where, like, how some people get very uncomfortable when they see like sexual stuff on screen, because I have a friend that's like that. Like they cringe like that whenever they see this. This movie is not going to be for people like that. You are going to have a conniption watching this movie. Also, one thing too that kind of perplexed me with this movie is that it had a $55 million budget, but it doesn't feel like a $55 million movie. Like the reference one that came out not even 2 weeks before this, or I guess 2 weeks before this exactly, Civil War had a budget of 50 million. This one had a budget of 55 million. And I get it, Zendaya ain't cheap, but good googly moogly, are you like 5 million more than Civil War? Like, you don't even have to have seen Civil War. If you've seen a trailer for Civil War, you have a good idea of the budget that, or not even the budget, the type, because I said the budget, but the type of production that went into like the CGI and effects and stuff like that. A tennis movie of this nature costing around the same as a Civil War movie is kind of crazy. Like, that was really shocking to me, and I'm not even the type of person that plays box office stuff, because this is my first time I'm bringing it up this entire video. My first time actually bringing it, well, no, I brought it up on Chaos Walking, but that was a different story for a different situation. But either way, that was crazy to me as well. But back to the movie itself. The movie was cool. Didn't hate it. I thought Zendaya was fine. It was decent. It was decent. I really came out of the theater kind of pretty high on it, but after sitting with it, it hasn't aged the best with me. And I'm not saying like it went from like an A+ to like a D, like nothing like that. And this is something that tends to happen with me a lot. Like very, very rarely do I have situations where I watch something and days later I'm higher on it. In fact, what typically happens is the exact opposite. I usually come away watching a movie and after a few days I'm literally ready to drop it like half a grade lower, or like sometimes a full grade lower, because sometimes, I get caught up in the moment. I'm still getting used to going to the theaters and stuff like that. Like sometimes I get tricked by the big sounds and like the big screen and just the environment, and it's like this new thing I'm watching for the first time on this like big screen. It's like sometimes I get caught up in that. I'm still getting adjusted to that, so just bear with me. But yeah, this one I really loved, but after a while I was like, this is kind of whatever. I see a lot of people saying like this is going to be up there with Doom Part 2. I do think that like when it's all said and done at the end of the year, I do think a lot of like uppity film critics and sometimes maybe even some casual people, especially if you're a tennis type of person, if you're somebody that you're into Zendaya or whatever, I can see this movie at the end of the year being one of those movies that people have in like their top 5, top 10. Like I can definitely see that. It just won't be for me, and it's not necessarily because it's a bad movie. It just did some things that just didn't really work with me. I thought the ending dragged like a bitch. Like, Jesus Christ, did the last ending drag. Like that slow-mo, we were reaching Zack Snyder levels of slow-mo. I hate to offend the Zack Snyder crowd, but still gotta watch Rebel Moon too. I haven't seen that yet. It's not gonna be part of this because obviously I haven't seen it, but yeah, this was slow-mo. Like the ending was just it just was a little all over the place while being slow, which is funny, but it makes sense if you saw the movie. Other than that though, I really don't have too much to complain about outside of just everything just being cool, just being okay. So grade rating on Challengers, which I talked about a lot longer than I thought I was going to talk about it, but yeah, grade rating on Challengers, we'll give this one a oh man, what are we gonna give? I'll give it a B plus. Yeah. All right, so next up we have the Planet of the Apes trilogy, which is not going to end up being a trilogy when May 10th comes around, because that's when Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes come out. Now, I've seen all 3 of these, but I went back and rewatched them just to kind of refresh my memory a little bit in preparation for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I know I'm still, about a week or 2 out, so I maybe jumped the gun a little bit, but I kind of wanted to like watch them anyway right now. I was kind of in the mood where it's like, let me watch these now. And it's crazy how I didn't realize these movies altogether were pretty well received. I always kind of felt like these movies were kind of hit or miss, but no, these across the board are considered amongst a lot of people like really good movies. Now, I think the first one is the best one. I do. I don't know if that's like the consensus or whatever. I do think the first one is the best one. I think the second one is really good. I think the last one, I think it goes in order of like the first one being the best, second one second best, and the third one is the third best. And I think Kingdom, it has the potential to be something. I see the trailers. I really like that they're skipping forward quite a bit ahead of time. I think this is definitely one of the more underappreciated franchises that we have right now, that not a lot of people seem to bring up as like a franchise that doesn't really have misses. Like all of these movies are like really good. Like none of them are bad movies. They're all pretty good films. And even if you're somebody where you're not into the CGI fest that it is, because obviously it's a CGI fest. I mean, we're talking about apes that can talk and move around and, hold guns and shoot them and stuff like that. But no, I really like these movies. I will say this though, War for the Planet of the Apes, I had no idea that Woody Harrelson was the main antagonist. I saw this movie maybe 2-3 different times. I had no idea that he was the main villain. Why is that not taught? Like, can we, outside of, the new Venom with Carnage, I can't really think of, and maybe because I'm young, so I'm not, from that era where Woody was being Woody, but I can't really think of too many times where like Woody Harrelson plays like the villain. And that's part of what kind of made this movie kind of fall off for me. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is what I'm talking about. I don't think it was that good of a villain. I really wasn't into it. I know that might sound like blasphemy. I love Woody Harrelson. I love him in the most recent movie he did, Suncoast. I thought that movie was very underrated. It's a Hulu original though, so most Hulu originals, even if they are good, are going to end up being overrated. Well, underrated, because people don't really check for Hulu like that, at least their original content. Outside of The Bear, which obviously won a lot of Emmys, so maybe what I just said just doesn't make any sense. But either way, Woody Harrelson in this movie was pretty jarring. It was interesting when I was like, wait, it was Woody Harrelson? But yeah, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I'll probably go with like a A-. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, we'll go B, and War for the Planet of the Apes, I'll go B-. I do think these are movies where, like, if you haven't seen any of the Planet of the Apes movies, because maybe you're not into CGI stuff, I still think you should give them a shot because they are good movies. I just am not as high on them as other people seem to be. And maybe it's because the first one is an origin story and it's a slow burn and stuff like that. It is one of those movies where, like, I guess on a rewatch, because it so much so builds up to like that final 10-15 minutes. So for a lot of people, they're going back and rewatching it, like that first hour or so just doesn't really hit like that. For me, I still like really appreciate the build up of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, like what it builds up to towards that last 20-25 minutes. I think it is great. I think it is like one of the best executed like slow burn films I've seen, like, period. I really enjoy it, even though we all know what it builds up to, that one moment where Caesar finally speaks and it's like this, whoa, what the hell? And I get it only works once really, but I still think the build up is nice. So last but not least on the movie list, we have a random one we're pulling out here, The Empty Man. Now, I'm on TikTok a decent amount. I'm not as bad as I was beforehand. And what happens with TikTok, right, and I love doing this with TikTok, where I'll come across a clip from a movie without any context, and it'll show like this horror thriller movie, and it'll show a specific scene, like I said, without any context. And it gives this impression like this horror movie or this thriller movie is actually pretty interesting. And what happens is I'll end up and go and watch it, and it ends up being a pretty rough movie. And it's kind of like a tradition at this point. I kind of like doing it because I'm just kind of, I guess, maybe torturing myself and waiting for the moment where I actually come across one. It's like, oh, okay, so that clip actually, okay, it was telling a true story. This movie actually is pretty good. And for The Empty Man, I saw a clip where it was like this bonfire and all these people were like circling around it on some Midsommar type shit. And I saw it and I was like, okay, this looks pretty interesting. It reminded me of Midsommar. So I was like, okay, this movie might be pretty good. I went to go watch it. Movie's not that good. It's not that good. And listen, like, I get it, but this movie has like one of the most generic main characters you can have in one of these type of movies. Like, if I tell you right now this character was an undercover cop that is now retired, you already know how, like, I could say that and present you with every scenario that he ends up in, and you guys can accurately predict what he ends up doing in that scenario, like 1-to-1. He is the most generic main character, and I get it, for some horror movies that might work. For a movie like this that tries to take itself a little too serious, which I'm not mad at, but if you're gonna take yourself serious and you're gonna have a runtime of 2 hours and 17 minutes for a horror movie that is trying to deal with cults, trying to deal with a supernatural creature, trying to deal with the manifestation of a supernatural creature, you better come with it. And this movie unfortunately did not come with it. I do think if they had a different main character, and I don't want to just shit on the guy because who knows, he might be good in other stuff, I don't know, and I don't care, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. In this movie, personally, I did not really like enjoy him. But the movie itself, essentially what happens is there's this supernatural being, right? And these people that were out on a snow trip, I guess, or whatever. In 1995, they discover it. One of them falls down, ends up getting trapped by the spirit, ends up taking out all his friends. Fast forward, 23 years later, apparently what ends up happening is this guy was manifested by this cult that ended up worshiping that creature that the guy ended up finding back in 1995. And I guess through planning throughout these different type of things with, like, you know, the mind, and there was a lot of different things about, like, the power of the mind, the power of, like, communication, telecommunication, telepathy, and stuff like that. A lot of that different type of talk in this movie. Like I said, this movie really tries to get deep, tries to get serious, tries to take itself way too serious. And throughout that, you get, like, a lot of these moments where it's just like, what are we doing here? But either way, this cult was able to manifest this guy through just the power of the mind, and was able to create an entire backstory for this guy, was able to create him into being an actual being, so much so that people around him, I guess, were just on board with it as well. People that aren't even part of the cult just kind of went along with, like, oh yeah, you've been around for a while, like, we know who you are. And it's like, apparently they say he's only been alive for 3 days. And I had so many questions, because it was like, okay, let's say I'm on board for the fact that you manifested this guy into being an actual person and he actually exists, right? Okay, cool. How are you able to convince people around him that he also is, like, he's been around? And how are, like, detectives and stuff like that, like, hey, you were an undercover cop, like, come on, you know how these things go. Like, everybody is just so matter of fact with this dude, and apparently he's only been around for 3 days. Like, what is that about? And very early on, you can tell that he's prepped to become the new vessel for this supernatural creature, because that was the whole thing. They manifested him so he could replace the guy that assumed control of the supernatural creature back in 95. And they created him so that he can kind of trade and be the new vessel for it. That's the whole thing. But throughout this movie, you're just like, man, what is going on here? Like, can this movie, like, stop? Like, it gets too deep for its own good, where it ends up not even explaining a goddamn thing, and it just expects you to just, like, no, like, listen, we're being weird, we're being interesting, like, just go along with it, like, don't question it, like, just know that we're being weird with it and just accept it. It's like one of those type of situations where it's like, no, I would really like you to kind of, like, take a step back and peel back these layers a bit more, because what you guys are doing right now makes no fucking sense, and it's not working the way you guys think it's working. And I know I'm shitting on this movie a lot, and it does have certain moments in it that I enjoy, like that scene where the people are walking around the campfire and, like, they come up on him and they stare and, like, all turn at the same time and look at him, and every time he takes a step back, all of them take a step forward, and then he ends up running away. I thought that whole scene was dope. I thought that was cool. The scene where he stumbles into like this occult, like the institute, and he's like talking with these people, and they just have this very uncanny valley vibe to them, and he's just like looking around like, am I the only one here that just like sees how fucking creepy this shit is? I thought that was funny. I like his reactions to certain things. Like I said, in the scene where every time he took a step back, they were taking a step closer to him. I like how he had that moment where he was just like, yeah, no. Like he just straight up said, yeah, nah, I'm not with this. And I like how when he was driving away in his car, he was like, what the fuck was that? Because that's how a lot of us would, like if we're all getting chased, if any of us was in that situation where we're getting chased by a group of like cult members, and we finally get away and we're driving away, I'm sure all of us would share that same statement that he made where it's like, what the fuck was that about? I thought all of that was funny. Outside of that though, this movie is dreadful. Did not like it, did not enjoy it. I might be a little too harsh on this movie because I do see that it actually is received pretty well. I don't know how. I really don't know how. I'm sorry, that sounds like hate. But yeah, also the beginning sequence too is just like a bit too long. Like I feel like I say this a lot with certain movies that run too long. If they would have trimmed the fat, cut this movie maybe about like 30 minutes or so, I feel like it maybe would have been a lot better for me. But grade rating on this movie, I'll probably give it like a D+. I really wasn't a fan of this movie. As far as what I'm looking forward to next week, which is technically this week when you're seeing it because this is coming out on a Sunday, I don't know what I'm most excited for, honestly. There's really nothing coming out this week that I'm like excited to go see, because like we have The Fall Guy, but I'm not expecting great things from it. We have Tear It, which I'm also not expecting great things from. Spider-Man 3, I kind of know what that's going to be like, so it's not really a anticipation type of thing. Yeah, I don't know what else. I really don't know. I think The Dark Knight Rises actually comes out this week as well. I think they're re-showing that one. So I definitely be interested to seeing that in theater. I haven't seen The Dark Knight Rises in theater before, so that might be my most anticipated actually. Because The Fall Guy, I kind of know this is probably going to be okay. And I know Tenet is probably going to be pretty rough, and Spider-Man 3 I know I'm going to have a blast with. So I think Dark Knight Rises is probably going to be my pick for most anticipated. But that is going to do it for this week. And movies and shows, even though I talked about one show and I'm saying shows. But until next one, which will be next Sunday, I will see you guys when I see you guys. Peace and love, and remember to eat your veggies.